Europe's open borders are closing. Germany joins a growing list of EU countries to at least partially shut out their neighbors. Authorities here deciding to close boundaries with Switzerland and Austria. That's according to German media reports. Added restrictions are also being imposed on the French-German boundary. Those measures are expected to begin on Monday. In Germany itself, authorities have not yet imposed the kind of strict nationwide measures we're seeing in other European countries. But authorities are urging people to take precautions to slow the spread of the coronavirus. Shops have been busy as people stock up on essentials, and that's leading to shortages of some items. Toilet paper, for example, non-perishable foods and vegetables. Many German states have decided to shut down schools and tourist attractions. Joining me now is DW correspondent William Noah Glucroft. He's reporting for us in Berlin. William, Germany now the latest country in Europe to shut at least some borders. What more do we know at this hour about that closure?
Yes, this information came across just within the last hour or so from German media reporting that, yes, borders to France, Austria, Switzerland will, if not be fully closed, at least be heavily restricted starting Monday morning, starting with the Monday morning commute. It should be noted that there's been no official government announcement or decision yet. That is also reported to be coming later this evening, what exactly the details of these closures or restrictions are going to be. It does seem that non-essential traffic is going to be stopped at the borders, at these three particular borders. But commuters and goods will still be able to pass through the borders. Apparently, according to reports, the idea is not only to stop the spread of the virus, but also to stop the spread of or the amount of people who are coming across borders to try to squirrel away, stocking up on all kinds of products, people who live in the border region. So that seems to be the goal of what these border restrictions are going to be. But again, an official announcement will be coming later this evening, according to German media reports.
William, at least 10 other countries in the EU or the Schengen area have closed borders as well. What does this mean now for the EU, which really prides itself on freedom of movement?
Yes, Germany, of course, has bordered neighboring countries beyond just these three countries listed. There have not been announcements about those countries, as Czech Republic, the Netherlands, Denmark, Poland, but these countries themselves have also imposed their own border restrictions already, as have many other EU countries, as you've just said. This is really the underpinning of the EU, of the idea of free movement and open borders of goods and people. This is what the EU is all about, and this is why Germany has been really hesitant the last couple of weeks to go along with this border closure idea. It's a rather controversial idea, of course. Germany has a long history. It was a divided country itself between East and West during the Cold War, where a wall ran through the country, dividing the border and keeping the border closed. Of course, the Iron Curtain between the Soviet East and the capitalist West. And of course, in 2015, who can forget that Angela Merkel is famous for keeping the borders open during the migration crisis, and now she may be known as the chancellor who closed the borders, at least in part, for this virus.
William, briefly, if you can, you're in Berlin. Some restrictions have now taken effect. What does daily life look like where you are?
I mean, people are still out and about, but it's definitely rather quiet. And the full restrictions come in tomorrow with schools, clubs, bars, and the like, public life basically in general, shutting down. And just to give you an idea of the scale of what we're facing here in Berlin, 150,000 school children are estimated to not have childcare once those schools close. And only emergency parents who have emergency jobs, essential jobs, will be able to have that emergency care for them. And the rest of the kids still have to wait and see what will happen with them.
William Noah Glucroft reporting for us in Berlin. Thank you very much. We want to bring in DW correspondent Lisa Lewis. She is in Paris. And Marcus Bunisch is reporting in Madrid for us. If we have those two, Marcus, I want to ask you, 47 million people in Spain, they're ordered to stay inside now. How do things look where you are?
Well, it seems that it works, at least here in Madrid. And this is maybe because Madrid is for days now the hotspot in Spain. All over the country, we have 2,000 more infections within 24 hours. So people here are taking it seriously. There are only few people in the streets, and what I've seen, especially some remaining tourists.
Lisa, let's go to you now. Strict lockdown measures in France as well. How are people responding in Paris?
Well, I've been talking to some people who told me that they understood the measures, that they understood that the cases of newly contaminated people had gone up. But when you walk through the streets here in Paris, they are not deserted. The local food shop, for example, there are lots of people there. They were not keeping any distance. And also there are pictures of packed farmers market here in Paris. It looks like not everybody is taking this seriously.
Well, clearly this sort of thing is not easy to enforce. Marcus, in Spain, how are authorities trying to make sure that people follow this lockdown?
Well, people firstly were informed about the possible punishments, up to 30,000 euros if you are not respecting the lockdown rules. People can walk out when they have to buy food, when they have to go out with a dog, when they have to care for some elder people, for example. But the rest of the people have to stay at home, and police is controlling it, and the government is concentrating the powers on every police unit here, even in the regions. So they are standing under the government's decisions and rules.
And we saw they're even using drones to make announcements to people that are outside. Lisa, now France's prime minister has called COVID-19 the, quote, biggest health crisis in a century, and yet France holding local elections today. Tell me about that. Why did they go ahead with this election?
Yes, absolutely. There was a lot of pressure on the government to carry them out. Actually, the opposition was saying, especially the centre-right party was saying that you need to have these elections. But there has been a lot of criticism. The government said we will put in place specific measures, certain distances between people, voters at the polling stations. But I've been walking around, and at the polling stations I went to, there were so many people that there was no minimum distance to be kept, and no one seemed to be using that disinfectant that was put there for people who went to vote. And the local election worker even told me that there were too many people to disinfect the polling stations in between, that they didn't have time for that. So there is certainly a lot of criticism that the government might be facing if these local elections today increase the number of contaminated people in the coming days.
Lisa Lewis reporting for us in Paris, Marcus Bunisch in Madrid. Thank you so much to you both. Well, as we heard, the Spanish government imposing severe restrictions on public life, the latest country to do so, ordering its 47 million citizens to essentially stay home. Bars, restaurants, and non-essential shops there have been told to close. Streets, as we saw in the capital city, deserted as authorities declare a national emergency now. Spain reported 1,500 new coronavirus infections and 70 deaths in just one day. In fact, the wife of Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez and two government officials have tested positive for COVID-19. Citizens in Europe and around the world adapting to drastic changes to daily life as new lockdowns and restrictions go into effect due to the coronavirus pandemic. We want to take a look now at some of the latest developments. England is planning self-isolation measures for all people above the age of 70 for up to 4 months. Austria's Chancellor Sebastian Kurz says his government is banning gatherings of more than 5 people due to the coronavirus. Iran's death toll has now leapt by 113 in one day to reach 724. And the Vatican says all Easter services will take place behind closed doors. No worshippers in attendance. Pope Francis is holding Sunday blessings via TV and the internet. Meanwhile, the United States has tightened its ban on visitors from Europe. President Donald Trump says it will now include travelers from Britain and Ireland who were exempted from the initial ban a week ago. Trump said he was also considering travel restrictions within the United States to areas hit hardest by the virus's spread. Well, in countries that are far away from coronavirus hotspots, the response from authorities has ranged from tough to non-existent, and that's causing worries that the pathogen could easily spread to other parts of the world.
As the coronavirus pandemic cancels public gatherings and sparks lockdowns around the world, in Mexico, crowded scenes like this have raised more than a few eyebrows. Tens of thousands of music fans flocked to Mexico City's Viva Latino festival at the weekend. While entrance staff carried out temperature checks, once inside, you would barely notice the difference. But some fans were angry that the organisers didn't cancel the festival and attended because they'd otherwise lose the price of the ticket.
Now that some of the bands we wanted to see were cancelled, it seems disrespectful to me that they didn't call the whole event off, and the fact that they put us all at risk, to tell you the truth.
Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador shrugged off the risk of infection at the weekend by holding rallies with hundreds of supporters, sparking anger by kissing small children. Elsewhere, countries were clamping down hard on their borders. In Venezuela, people trying to reach Colombia were left stranded after Bogotá unilaterally shut the border between the two nations on Saturday, with just a few hours' notice.
They should have warned us in time and jointly agreed to close the borders so as not to leave people in the streets suffering.
In China, authorities will send international arrivals to Beijing straight to quarantine centres from Monday. Infections brought in from overseas now outnumber domestically transmitted cases. In the Philippines, police have sealed off the densely populated capital, Manila, for a month-long isolation, though workers are among those still allowed to enter and leave. Like so many places around the world, it's hoping drastic measures will slow the virus's spread.